in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey, Not the Face with your host, John Nash, and your producer, me, Steffi Haynes. And today we've got a bit of a hodgepodge episode, but it is all fight and fighter related. But first, let's check in with John and see how he's been since the last time we talked.
Good. We're big birthday here today. It's Isla's big 05.
Oh my goodness.
So we gotta get candles lit and all that, get her presents. It's a huge, we gotta get the guests over. It's gonna be huge.
Oh my goodness. I love a good soiree. All right.
Oh yeah. Come on over for some tuna.
So John, last night we had Jorge Masvidal taking on Nate Diaz, and there were a couple of surprises with this. One, the gate supposedly had 16,000 people, 16,000 plus. Two, the fight was sort of entertaining. Now, I have not seen the whole thing, but I've seen a lot of clips from it, and I went through and I did a search on the hashtag, and believe it or not, people were wildly entertained with this fight of watching two almost 40-year-old dudes go in there and throw dukes. And apparently between the two of them, they threw almost 1,400 punches, or just over 1,400 punches. Another thing that shocked me. But the thing that shocked me the most was what they were paid. Because apparently Nate Diaz made $500,000 and Masvidal made $300,000. So I got to ask you, my first question is what you thought of those payouts.
Well, we got to remember this is the reported payouts,
yes,
not the total. So it's Nate Diaz 500,000, Masvidal 300,000. Now, also Masvidal did an interview, a couple interviews, and I can't remember which one was which, but he did one and he talked about the difference between boxing and MMA, and so you can infer from that while his contract is a little different, Nate Diaz is basically working on kind of a boxing model. So that 500,000. My guess is, now there might be a higher minimum that they both, because this was done through FanMeo, right? Mm-hmm. So my guess would be FanMeo put up a certain amount of money, promised a minimum guarantee. 500,000 they would get paid on the night. 500,000 for Diaz is the A side. Masvidal, I think, admitted that Diaz negotiated as the A side, and Jorge would get 300,000 the night of, because that check has to clear the next day. Then they would get paid they would be guaranteed a certain amount, and then they get their cut too of the event. So for Diaz, obviously, as working on a boxing model, he would get a cut of the gate. He would get a cut of the pay-per-view buys. He'd get sponsorship, a piece of everything. So even though I don't think this fight might have done much better than I thought, because one, as you said, it was packed. The audience, the gate might have been bigger than I thought, because it reported, they announced originally 15,000, but then later the promotion said it was over 18,000 in attendance and a sellout. So you would suggest, I don't know what the ticket prices were, it'd be a couple million. There was a big reaction on Twitter, was trending a lot. So maybe the pay-per-view buys did better than I would suspect. So if that, but not, I don't think it did as much. In other words, I don't think Nate Diaz is going to make as much as he did against Jake Paul. Maybe I'll get some more details in the coming week or so. But he will make, I think, a lot more than the event. The gate and stuff should cover the basic costs. I think Diaz will make much more than the 500,000, multiples more than that. In fact, I wouldn't be shocked if this is on the high side or above whatever he made is his highest UFC purse, which I think against McGregor was 4.2 million, 4.4 million, something like that. And then undercard too, some guys were getting paid pretty. Anthony Pettis got 350,000, right?
Wow.
As reported payout. And that is on the high end of his, if I remember, on his UFC payouts. So, and on a side note too, I remember Pettis was on Hawani, and I think he said he got $1 million bonus checks after the Benson Henderson and the what was the other, Gilbert Melendez. Now maybe that's true, but I should note we do have all the payouts the UFC reported during that period, And I do not see Pettis getting $1 million during that period. I do not see it. His purse pay is about, what has he got? In about 510,000, I think, at UFC 181 versus Gilbert Melendez, is it reported as? So maybe he meant the two together was $1 million. But anyways, this 350,000 represents a pretty sizable purse for him in his MMA career. And so for a bunch of old guys, I guess I'm happy for a bunch of them.
I want you to do me a projection, and this is purely speculation for our listeners out there. But if you were to look at this, and let's call it a good gate, let's say it's like 2 million. Okay, we'll call it 2 million. Mm-hmm. Give me just a ballpark figure of what both of them could make off gate and pay-per-view and everything else. And we'll say that the pay-per-view drew, let's say 200,000. I don't want to go any higher than that because this is a non-UFC pay-per-view. So I can't legitimately project, this thing did 500,000 because I don't believe that it did.
Yeah, the one benefit, it was a little cheaper. Now, interesting enough, I went to talk to people that did pay-per-views in boxing and stuff, and went through some numbers. What would Ngannou have to do to break even, right? I think their number was the buys would have to probably hit like 350,000 for an Ngannou event to break even because he gets a $10 million guarantee as opponent. So for Masvidal Diaz, the thing is, the lower the buys, the less they're going to make because there's just your basic amount you have to cover production, the other purses, the marketing costs, all those. So it's when you clear that pay-per-view becomes incredibly lucrative. So when you get to a normal boxing event, and you hit a 500,000 pay-per-view, the two main event can maybe combine up to 30 million. You get 700,000, you can get up to like 40 million for the main event combined, what the boxers are making. So that's where you get these huge numbers. But for this event, let's say it did a $2 million gate, 200,000 buys. What was it priced at? $50? I think it was a cheaper pay-per-view price.
I think so.
So you got to, most of them are probably digital. They get a bigger digital chunk, but they have to, pay off certain other entities, get a percentage. So let's say they get $30 per buy to 6 million, sponsorship and everything else, a couple million. So you're looking at if depending on how it's split, the main event's going to have, this is just a guess based on that. Main event's probably going to have like a couple million, $3-4 million between them. If it did just a $2 million gate and 200,000 buys, this is with the idea too that they didn't do big internationally. Who knows? Maybe these guys are massive overseas somewhere and they made millions on the overseas, right? But I don't see that as happening. But you put it together and you're talking like a $12 million. 10 to $12 million in total revenue. So you're talking $3, $4, $5 million maybe for the main event combined. That would be my guess based on those numbers. Now, again, that's purely a guess. So,
and with Nate being a side, how much would you expect that split to be? Especially just looking right here at the 500 and the 300.
Well, it was interesting when Masvidal talked about that. He was given permission by the UFC. His UFC contract's not up, he said in that interview. He was given permission to sign a deal and work with someone else. But he also mentioned that his deal is different than a boxing deal. So almost makes it sound like maybe his deal is a loan out, right? A loan out in boxing is when you still have the rights to the boxer. You let someone else have them, and in exchange for that, you get, you might be able to negotiate, but you get a piece of what he's making, or maybe it's set up differently with the UFC, where the UFC structures it where we'll pay Masvidal, but we get control of certain aspects of the Masvidal's fight. Well, if that's the case, Masvidal might not get nearly as much as Diaz, because again, Diaz is going to get a piece of the gate. Diaz is going to get a piece of the pay-per-view. Diaz is going to get, Diaz, it depends on, has to clear the expense first. And then you normally cover the basic cost, and then everything above that you split. So, but I mean, on that basis, I would say Diaz is probably, I don't think it might be 2-1. Diaz is going to make twice as much as Masvidal.
Wow.
In that ballpark, probably.
Okay.
He's the A side, and on top of that, the way Masvidal talked, he is not he's not getting all the pieces that you would in a boxing match.
All right. So next topic I want to discuss, we've got a trio of fighters here, and we're going to start with the UFC fighter. We're going to start with Khamzat Chimaev because he has been recently linked to a crypto scam. Now, I want to get your take on that situation, and do you think that he eventually makes it to another fight, or is he essentially done here? Because it seems like his visa issues are linked to Kadyrov. So I don't know what is happening there, but this crypto scam does not bode well, correct?
No. Well, I'm not surprised by the crypto scam because there's a lot of fighters. I mean, Jake Paul and his brother Logan Paul have been connected to things like this. And even Khabib was tied to certain things and other fighters. So, I mean, I don't know if Chimaev is the type that orchestrated this, but a lot of fighters, the mentality, some fighters we know are very nice and they would never like screw over their fans or just the public in general. You know, they view this as a job, but there's a large segment of fighters that have kind of a very selfish, narcissistic viewpoint. And it also due to the fact that it's the nature of the sport. You beat, you win, you kill your enemy. You not literally kill them, but you beat them up. You earn what you kill. Everything, it's a dog eat dog world, this Nietzschean world they live in. And their point of view, it's like I think for some fighters, the idea that you're scamming people doesn't matter. You're the sucker for falling for the scam. It's your fault. My job is to prey on anybody that would fall for this. So I don't think, I don't think he's going to be ostracized for that because I think it's something common for a large segment of the fighters would do the same thing. That said, I don't think his fighting career is done, but there's a definite limit to his potential because, as you said, it seems very likely that he has visa problems because of the Kadyrov incident or his connections to Kadyrov, just like Till apparently has visa problems and probably connected to his connection to Daniel Kinahan. And Kadyrov, too, I believe, has connections to Kadyrov as well. Till has connections to Kadyrov. Did he show him take a picture with him once?
He sure did. Yes, sir.
So, way to go, Till. Way to cover both ends of the of
the gangster, the criminal empires.
Yeah, of all the people the State Department sanctioning and not let you did both of them to make sure you never can get in the U.S. Good job there. Smart, very smart. But for him, so the UFC, the one positive for him is the UFC is set on making as much money as possible out of the Middle East right now with the Saudis and United Arab Emirates. So his career, for anybody else, his career would probably be done. But for him, it's like, well, we'll use him there anyways, because that's where we want to get huge amounts of money. And he's a major attraction there. So he lucks out in some sense because there's such interest in the region.
All right, next we have Ryan Garcia. And boy, has he proven to be a whole ball of problems over the past year. I guess right after his loss to Gervonta, it seemed like he just came undone completely. And he has now been banned from WBC, which effectively rules him out of a lot of really big fights, in addition to his USADA. He's got a suspension for a year. They took away his pay. His official pay was returned to Oscar De La Hoya. I mean, there's just so much. They levied the maximum fine against him. And now he's been banned from the WBC for racist speech. How much do you think his earning potential has been reduced for his career going forward? Long term is what I mean. To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Ooh! Okay, the face!